Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reacts where today we have ourselves an album from an act named Khaosé if I'm not mistaken, titled EP, and if we switch over to here, this is a 10-track album. We've got the art up on the screen here. This is their debut album as I understand it. We're going to listen through it from start till finish and we're going to hear what we think. We've got 3 tracks today. The first of these titled Pennies/Worth, so let's go. What do we got?
King and his men, king and his forces. Would you observe? Are you cool with this machine? A doomed planet cracked by distrust, no. Secret Yamat, oh it's self-destruct, no. Creatures of the same celestial, but they divided. Followers only wanna be Marvel, they undecided. Benefits over being rational, we disunited. Battle for respect, and we lose all self-respect. We're so much more than this yet, we dare sold our worth. Away 40 little pennies and some posted out in an instant. What's absolutely sad is that it's not metaphorical. Hands up, salute to them while we up in them, their marks untraceable. Nobody's quitting, we are all loving the game, man. Everybody's killing to be the one at the front, man. These bodies filling up these bottom spaces. Muscle memories wheeling, we're too lazy to navigate.
Fantastic additional intensity here. Sound design.
You opted out of any upgrade. You lost all love coming at base. You're outdated. You will be wasted. Just as planned.
Religion, we just some hand-picked religious beliefs. Value selections, like all-you-can-eat buffet. Subscriptions, sign up for your favorite packages. Everyone only has personal agendas these days. Solo fights, but we pretend to be fun in the light. It's crazy, the evil entity got a hand in this, I bet. Keeping real friends away from us, time even change. Ultimately, only the spirits are left to help us through the challenge. Think about it, what's the point of going around catching? Those badges are useless when no one's around to see. No one left to study your collection data hypothesis. All you have left are the monsters you kept behind your pocket. Indeed, we're all loving the game, man. Busy to be the one at the front, yeah. Filling up these bottom spaces, but we don't think anymore. We're too lazy to navigate.
I love the doubling of the sequencer there as well, speed-wise. Excellent. Fantastic start to proceedings. Great first impression. So with this first track, Pennies/Worth, I think that it's about someone commenting on a state of play with how human beings interact with their own sort of like positional place in society, how we interact with technology like our subscriptions and like how we kind of treat life as a bit of a game and stuff like that, and how we maybe don't necessarily treat our own freedom and independence with as much sort of like respect as it's needed, you know, like we're trading our pennies. Yeah, but are we losing our sort of worth in the meantime? You know, how much is our labor? How much is our attention worth? I think there are a lot of other questions being asked here, and I just think it's kind of cool to listen to music with these kind of subject matters that are a bit more sort of like general and sort of like more of a commentary on things around us. I like that Khaosé is thinking about stuff like this. So in terms of things that I thought were done well, because I'm going to talk about a few things I thought were done well per track and then any sort of applicable constructive critique. I think that the first thing to sort of talk about is the general sort of like sound production, you know, as a whole. I like how things are leveled. I like how things are spread around the stereo field. I think that there is a nice sort of adjustment of dynamic range, or rather of loudness via the dynamic range, such as when the vocals are in the center of the stereo field, the sequences are a bit more sort of subtle, and then they kind of build up when the vocals aren't there anymore. They take advantage of the space that's provided there. So we're very sort of like clearly sort of aware of the importance of having like a sort of a focal point and not overwhelming the listener. I liked how the vocals were treated in the mix. You know, they've got the sort of main vocals, which are a bit more sort of like straightforward, and then you've got some sort of like vocal chops or repeaters or like echoes, which I think have a different sort of synthesized texture, which kind of gives it more sort of like an electronic element to it, which I think, again, considering the technology we're talking about there, I think that makes a lot of sense. And ultimately, yeah, it's just general, it's nice and low without pumping. And I also like that it isn't squeezed, like it isn't too crushed volume wise. We're allowing room for the music to breathe while still having adequate sidechaining. I also think I appreciate that we could have gone for a more intense drop, but we kind of allowed it to be a bit more sort of lush. There's a clear sort of like tension to the progressions and the sort of tones and textures within the synthesizers and basses and stuff like that. But the drums kind of allow for it to not be kind of smashing your face in. And I think it's because the song maybe wants you to sort of dance, but also to think, rather than just kind of really sort of get lost in its world. The music surrounds you regardless, but just, I think the minor leaning is kind of an obvious thing, just, you know, considering the subject matter. But I just like the approach to the structure of it as well as the drop itself. I like that we didn't just do the typical thing with genres like this, especially when the subject matter again is heavy, and just kind of blast and just kind of blow the listener away. It's nice to have something a bit different. And I think it's the way the sequences are included. You know, the kind of the pulse and how they sort of writhe in the cans can honestly be just as effective as if you kind of blast them with bass. I think finally it's just the actual vocals and how we communicate in the mix. It's quite sort of like accessible. We are very sort of like comfortable with how we sort of communicate to the listener there. We have presence in the mix, not just from studio production, but also simply because we make room for ourselves from a compositional perspective. And it's nice to have, again, the kind of cool response between those synthesized vocals and the mains, but also simply to not have the vocals all the time. We don't over-egg the pudding, so to speak. We discuss different subject matter and we don't overstay our welcome with similar hooks or sort of like lines. I just feel like within the 3 minutes 30, we got a lot of subject matter there, and it kind of gives you an idea of what the rest of the EP might be about, especially with the EP be kind of like vague wording there. It makes me excited for what's going to happen next. But then we've got Precious Wounds. Oh, those sevenths are nice. It's a very playful little synth there, eh?
With or without you, the fight with the supernatural continues in this imaginary parlor, baby. I hope you're my personal dean, but you flew without him. Everyone became cool about it, to hope you can forgive in our own ways. We're all just coping. Sleeper agents, literally they infiltrate when we're about to sleep. Our heads heavy, we're spiraling. We count our ships, half left, the rest went to New Shepherd. Show me you come back for this one, you're supposed to precious.
I mean, like, I'll go back a little bit so we can hear the second verse, but it could have been such an easy thing to have continued to sort of ascend with the vocals there, going, you know, they kind of pitch shifted stuff, but then to sort of stop and then go back a little bit because we weren't near the apex of the track. I just think it's just kind of a unique thing that was kind of cool.
Where are you in this universe? There's no assurance. Having destinations luxurious. The one I have left is final. Fantasies being hopeful, like seeing your ship flying beneath clouds. Is it done? Please headbutt me out from this dream so foul. Each of my wounds are blessings. I'm counting on them all. Compasses that brought me the horizon. These are answered prayers. So I'll sing like the hunters. Still I will be here, standing like statues. Until the day return, the father of my world. numbers, sing like the hunters. Still I will be here, standing like statues until the day you return. The father of my world.
I'm not as sure about Precious Wounds. I'll be back with you in a moment. So with Precious Wounds, when I say that I wasn't sure about it, it's not because I disliked it. It's more that I just wasn't sure what the track was about. So to kind of summarize, I think Precious Wounds are kind of looking at the marks, scrapes, and scars that we get through our lifetime and looking at those like that is progress. Like these are things that even though maybe the experiences or sometimes the trauma that's left behind after from getting those scars, like what caused them, it's still evidence we made it through it, and that we didn't allow it to defeat us. I think that's a beautiful thing to discuss, especially when we talk about Pennies and Worth being more about like how we sort of game ourselves with the system and how it kind of plays us. Precious Wounds is sort of being a bit more sort of introspective and kind of going, okay, what do we think of ourselves irrespective of that? How do we function? What have we accomplished? How enough are we? So I think in terms of things that were done well here, I feel like the verse that you had, like the first verse where like the vocals were very sort of like free form. They weren't necessarily trying to form lines that neatly went within groups of four, like with stanzas, as in like you might wear with other tracks. And I think it's more because we're just trying to get, maybe mirroring our thought process, a lot of thoughts that go through our head in these kind of situations. Maybe we just needed to get a lot of information out at once. And I think that it does well in the sense that it captures the attention of the listener and does make them go, oh, wait, no, what is he really saying? And then you have the almost hypnotic flow of those hi-hats in the background, which is just incredibly soothing. So you have this kind of free-form, very organic thing going on. And then the other parts of the track are far more sort of like repetitive and consistent. So you can allow for a little bit of irregularity rhythmically there because you have things you can anchor yourself with. It's sort of just listening to someone say a lot and really trying to work stuff out. I think the choice of the softer, again, like the hi-hat focus and the kind of liquid drum bass here was a smart idea, if I'm not mistaken, genre-wise, primarily because it is incredibly kind to ourselves. I think the combination, again, of those 16th note hi-hats plus those extended chords there and the way that kind of looped in a very satisfying harmony, it infers a complexity or a further understanding of the situation that one might sort of like not sort of recognize at first. I like the sophistication of it. It implies that if we take enough time with the vocals, we're going to learn some stuff from it. I think they're really sort of soft, kind of oscillating synth pads that you get occasionally, such as around the 130 mark, are fantastic as well. They're just a nice sort of sub layer and make it sound kind of nice and fluffy. And we do have adjustments to the way the keys are played, like there's some arpeggios and sort of faster right hand parts. But the vocal chops as well, there's just a lot of kind of either sort of verbal or soft or kind of paddish kind of elements there that make it a very sort of fluffy, almost sort of dreamlike piece. And you do have adequate bass response, don't get me wrong, as well as kicks and snares in the drop sections. And we have sort of like, again, vocals that are modulated in the background, kind of iterating. I'm not necessarily sure of the words we're saying in that hook line for the chorus, but I assume it kind of summarizes a lot of what we're saying with the verse parts, considering the proficiency so far. But ultimately, it kind of works mostly in a major key as well, which I think was nice. Actually, no, is it a minor? No, it's a minor key. But it doesn't sound super depressing either because the lightness of a lot of the accents, the upper range resonance of parts. We're discussing potentially difficult subject matter, but we're not trying to bog the listener down with the specifics outside of what we're sort of happy to sort of share with them. And I think that most people can relate to the feeling of sort of recovering from your scars and becoming stronger through that process, so it's a kind of a beautiful thing going on. I think, yeah, it's just also nice as a closing comment when the drums aren't there, because you've got the bass just filling up that low end of the frequency spectrum there, and it sort of surrounds you in the headphones, and it reinforces some of the notes or progressions you had previously on the track, but in a different way so that you can revisit sort of like main sort of ideas without them becoming too stale or overplayed. We got finally track number 6, Handshakes / Rule. Oh, vinyl scratch on the right.
The only special, so my brain is yelling to not go simple. Are you up for a complex idea? Though you should lower your expectations. My prayer is short for this fun, don't let this be a bore. Give us wisdom, love me more. With this one, at least give me 6, it's a sympathy score. Remember that first handshake we made at the food court? Can the judge fully agree that nothing we had that day was lukewarm? Have the honor of unwrapping me like books you bought from the bookstore. My promise remains true, I still cover you with a blanket like them sushi rolls. Heart, mind and soul, they find me in unison. Forever they imprinted your name in me with fire. And I've studied the transformations of romances. Ever upward, we'll fly, forming lights. We're above the sun. Magical inspiration.
Great use of poetry there.
Gratification. Lovers. Unification. Artistic. Navigation. You and I versus the world, if the world survives, that is. Are you proud to have the ability to suddenly kiss me, to wake me? My whole body's coding lines, so you have to be Trinity right. Love from me to you is like a wind reviving a cute ghost look alike. You pray that I'll experience the softening of my heart again. Can I swim through timelines so I can be with you no matter when? Have our stars set in place, sparkle the same, I swear I'll sing what a friend. My wish is that when it ends, I'll hold your hands while we pass the gate. Heart, mind and soul, they find me in unison. Forever they imprinted your name in me with fire. And I've studied the transformations of romances. Ever upward, we'll fly, forming lights. We're above the sun. Magical inspiration. Narcissistic.
There's a lot to take in, isn't it, lyrically?
Lovers. Unification. Artistic. Navigation. Guess I have to be a rule breaker for a moment. Have you figured it out yet? The flow? Lifelong contract in an acrostic poem, keeping you addicted like our favorite show. Heart, mind and soul, they find me in unison. Forever they imprinted your name in me with fire. And I've studied the transformations of romances. Ever upward, we'll fly, forming lights. We're above the sun.
I'm less sure about this one thematically than the other three. That's not a bad thing. I like that I'm having to think about it and go, is there more than meets the eye? You know, it's nice to be thinking about music. I'm not sure who the handshake is for. I'm not sure. He says, you and me, son. I don't know whether he's meaning a literal child, or like it could be another person that he knows or something like that. Covering them like a blanket. I'm not sure. Occam's razor. I'm not sure what this one's about. I've listened through it a couple of times. Like there are individual things that could be it, but then I compare it to other parts of the track and I'm just not sure how to sort of tie them together. So any help in post is appreciated. But handshake / rule, in terms of things that were done well, I think that the vocal effects, like the whispers and the da-da-da-dum, I like the bits of ear candy and overdubs because it makes a track seem bigger than it is. You know, you can just have the vocals and tell a story, and that's often fine. But if you add that extra bit of, but what's happening over here is like we're kind of showing a self-awareness that we might want to or need to layer more in order to retain the listener's attention. And especially when it's like sounds or it's like additional context, you're flitting back and forth there to figure out what's going on. It's just sensible. And it's also a really chill melody, da 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 da, because it's a lot slower than the other two tracks. I think that's the second thing, is that we're putting a different style in here. It's very lush sounding with the pads and keys and everything like that. It's very bright and wistful and kind of sleepy sounding. It is very nice to listen to. But the slower tempo helps facilitate more of a relaxed feeling to it. It's really cool. And there are some parts we have like bell trees. Again, when he says magical, like it sounds like something magical is occurring. There's instruments tying to what's being sung or said vocally. I like that. There's cool responses off of that as well. With the da 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 dum. It's just the attention to detail is respectable. But then there's very faint. And again, part of it's the dynamic range of the EP or album as a whole. But the dynamic range allowing things to be a bit more chill, and as a sub layer in the background as we have a break and then back into the drum and bass, and it swamps and rolls over you, but just in a really pleasant way. I think the use of that 808 as well as a closing note, reinforcing things with the spoken parts and the charismatic performance on the mic. It's just the way that the bass makes it seem very full, because you have a lot of higher end elements with the keys and the synths and stuff like that, as well as the bell trees. The drums and snares are pretty short and staccato, so they don't have a tail on them. So just allowing the bass to be present there without that being cut or clipped is indicative of both proficiency from a studio production perspective, but also just that we know how much room we have to wiggle room we've got in terms of how we can put things and make tracks sound bigger. And the little slap back or slight delay on those do 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 up an octave on the keys at the start is just, it's knowing how to get that little bit of extra sparkle to it. It's already up in the other register, so it sounds again magical, but just that extra ba-dum-bum, it adds a bit of presence to it, which is nice. So again, while I'm not necessarily sure what this track's about, I still nonetheless appreciated listening through it. It was very peaceful, and it's just nice. So on the website, on Khaosé's website, they've got the lyrics, so we clearly understand what we're doing, I can't make it bigger. But just the storytelling. You are the only special, so my brain is yelling to not go simple. Are you up for a complete idea? Though you should lower your expectations. My prayer is short for this fun. Don't let this be a bore. Give us wisdom. Love me more with this one. At least give me a 6 as a sympathy score. Have the honor of unwrapping me like books you brought from the bookstore. I don't know what that means. I mean, study the transformation of romances. So is it about a romance or a relationship we have with someone else? Have our stars set in place sparkle the same? I swear I'll sing What a Friend. My wish is that when it ends, I'll be your hands while we pass to hold the gate. While we pass the gate. Yeah, I think it is about a relationship, a deep relationship, not just maybe having a friend, but also a partner. So I'm glad that I revisited that. So feel free to take that alongside everything else I've said. I'm going to talk about these tracks more in the conclusion. And so welcome to the conclusion of my review of these 3 tracks from an act named Khaosé off of their album titled EP. So we had, Pennies, Worth, Precious Wounds, and then Handshakes / Rule. And so just to confirm, these will be my overall thoughts on the tracks as a whole. I've already given my little mini conclusions to them, so if you want to go check them out, they'll be there at the end of each song or listen part. But I'll also be giving any applicable constructive critique, as well as my general thoughts from a listener's perspective to these. So first of all, what do we think this is about? I think this is more of a commentary in general from Khaosé on how people interact with the world around them and our self-worth, and how technology or authority takes it away. Precious, that being Pennies and Worth, Precious and Wounds more being related to how our scars and experiences define us, and trying to find worth and value through those. And then Handshakes / Rule, I think, is more about the way that they maybe met someone, and then the the contract or the life they're spending with each other, want to hold hands and walk through the gates together at the end. I think that there is a connection between these. I imagine there's probably more context if you listen through all of these 10 tracks in a row. So if you like this EP, I'd recommend. This album, should I say? You should check out the EP on their Spotify, as well as the other links in the description. But that's what I think this EP is about. There are different subject matters that are very important to Khaosé, that they're getting off their chest, and I feel like they're very accessible to people, and so I appreciate that. I think it's well done. I think one of the things that works really neatly about this album is just how accessible and personable Khaosé is. They don't try to overcomplicate their vocal performances by putting like a massive amount of deliberate expression behind it. I think they're more sort of trying to tell a story or, offer their poetry to you in various forms of stanzas. Sometimes they're more straightforward, like Pennies and Worth, you can kind of follow the lines a bit more simply. Other times with Precious and Wounds, there's a lot of information that kind of comes and irregular lengths of lines to kind of fill up a verse section before you kind of have that kind of drop or kind of further context of the instrumental parts. And I think that either way we nail it. I think as well that kind of spoken, more casual part at the end of Handshakes about a rule being broken. I think that that's just nice to be a bit more sort of playful, but we were also showing respect to our music and the kind of aesthetic that we're going for here. I just want to sort of give a shout out to the vocals though, because I like the processing on them, as well as the way we have call and responses and little bits of air candy in certain parts of the sides of stereo field at times. We fleshed that out really neatly. I think it's also the different instruments that we include, a mixture of keys and synth pads and sequences and basses and drums and beltries and other parts. And I just think these instruments, the way they're led with keys for piano, for example, with the arpeggios or the harmonies that we have, the extensions, it's just really charming because we know when to be a bit more sort of straightforward with a bit of heaviness there without being too on the nose, such as in Pennies/Worth. But then with Precious and Wounds, we have again those extensions, those major and minor seventh chords, or even sort of further or outside sort of diatonics, but that indicate a sense of sophistication without while still sounding good, And then Handshakes, there's a combination of these more deliberate compositional elements with more sort of atmospheric kind of ambient stuff that is almost sort of like a thought process in real motion. It's great to be able to go between those to allow moments where there is simply bass or there is not drums. A lack of drums and allowing things to float at times is really effective. I also like the drum tones, how they were never super aggressive or anything like that, because I just think the moment you commit to a heaviness on the drums like that, you've kind of got to get the other instruments to sort of pick up alongside it. So I just think it was sensible to kind of be a bit more sort of like careful about that. I think as an additional note, I like that we explore the main sort of quarters, 8th and 16th note rhythms with these tracks in general, and we also go faster ones. But then we also allow there to be whole notes and held ones to allow things to float. We have this kind of push-pull. Much like with composition, we have some parts where it's vocal-oriented and others we just have drops. And we have vocal chops and other ideas as well that form sort of like melodies or harmonies or sort of like more rhythmic devices. But it's really just kind of these tracks are fleshed out and make great use of the 3 to sub 3 minutes that we have there, right in that 2 to 4 minute sweet spot. And I think finally, it's the studio production, recording, mixing, mastering. I like the presence of the vocals in the mix, as well as the various sort of like extra effects and kind of repeaters or echoes on the side there, as well as the ad blips or overdubs. The way they're not all in the center of stereo field, they kind of spread out a little bit. I like how you also have like an awareness of how the synth basses and keys and all that interact with the vocals. When the vocals are there, things are a bit more sort of like low key and not too intense. When the vocals take away, such as in Pennies/Worth, they become a bit more sort of like dominant and like things are sort of like a bit more intense without being too much. But it's just like they're not trying to overwhelm the listener with too much information. I like that, like the entire frequency spectrum is filled out as well. You have the basses down the low end there, they're sort of refined. The keys or synths or pads that you have up top or in the center, they're either spread around to not interfere with the main and sort of like center components, or they are sort of notched in an octave perspective, kind of equally parts kind of composition to production, where when the vocals are there, you can hear them clearly and it just sounds, again, as I mentioned, lush. I think the beltry with the magical, there's like moments where like the music kind of like explodes and kind of like is very vivacious. And I think if you'd crushed things too much with the compression, it would have sort of killed it. So I'm glad that we didn't do that. And I think in general, there's dynamic range. Things aren't the same levels the whole time, although things are well leveled, and it's nice and loud without pumping to the bus compression and limiting is handled. There's no real applicable constructive critique for me. I feel like with these 3 tracks today, they're great individual concepts. I think it will be dependent on how the rest of the album went, in terms of like how the story flows, because I can kind of understand them individually. I think, from a general listener's perspective, I would probably need several times listening through these tracks to really sort of flesh them out to get what's going on there, because I feel like there's a lot of subtext, and you need to look through the lyric book, should I say, on the website to really get everything there, because there's a lot that's said, especially. And I suppose it's not technically a critique, because it's okay to have the style of communicating with a listener. You've just really got to kind of pick your lane, whether, in my opinion, whether you go with the vocal focus, whether you go with like the active passive listening. But I feel like you can get a good experience with both. It's just that Khaosé is inherently interesting to listen to. So there is that kind of difficulty, I suppose. I suppose it's not a bad problem to have. You either want to listen to Khaosé, and then you kind of listen again to get the full sort of like intricacies of the music behind him, or you try both and have a great time. Like, there's many different ways you can explore this album. So ultimately, I'm very happy with it. Really positive review. Thank you for watching my review of this album titled EP from Khaosé, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show us some love via their various social medias and a Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe. Please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world, and I will catch you in the next SP Reacts. Spiderhands out.